Do you want more 100% IVs in your collection in Pokemon Go? Well, today we're going to be breaking down the best ways to get 100% IVs from the worst odds all the way to the best odds. And some of these methods you might not even know yourself. Okay, quickly, if you don't know how IVs work, IVs stand for individual values, and every Pokemon can have an attack, defense, and stamina IV of 0 to 15 points. IVs calculate the Pokemon's CP value, their attack, stamina, and defense stats, and then are added to the Pokemon's base stats. IVs in Pokemon Go cannot be changed. However, if you do have a Shadow Pokemon, you can purify, which will add 2 points to all of their IVs. Also, in the main series games, there's an item called the Bottle Caps, which, if Niantic ever does bring them in Pokemon Go, might give us the chance to actually buff IVs on our already existing Pokemon. But for now, your IVs you get on a Pokemon, you're stuck with. Okay, let's start by talking about the worst odds for hunting 100% IVs or hundos in Pokemon Go. And that's going to include catching Pokemon in the wild or hunting them from Team Go Rocket grunts / leaders. With no weather boost, there is a total of 16 IV points a Pokemon can have, meaning 1 in 4,096 is going to be our base odds for 100% IV in the wild or from grunts. Wild Pokemon, by the way, are always caught from level 1 to 30, and Team Go Rocket grunt Pokemon are always caught at level 8. However, we can actually buff these odds by playing in weather boosted conditions. Depending on what weather it is in game, different Pokemon will be weather boosted, meaning their IVs are going to be higher, and they will actually be able to be caught at 5 levels higher than original. The odds of getting 100% IV in weather boosting conditions are 1 in 1,725, so a big jump, almost 2 times the odds of getting one. Pokemon in weather boosting conditions can be caught from level 6 all the way up to level 35 as the highest, and for Team Go Rocket grunts, they will always be level 13 when caught. Now, every single Pokemon species has a guaranteed CP that will be 100% IV from it, meaning when you're catching Pokemon in the wild, there is a chance you can actually know it's a hundo before you catch it by looking at the CP. Specifically, a level 30 or level 35 Pokemon is the highest level that Pokemon can be, meaning that's guaranteed to be that 100% IV because the CP couldn't be any higher, because the Pokemon's level can't be higher. However, sometimes it is hard to spot a hundo because some of the lower level Pokemon might have 100% IV CP, but it's not a hundo because it's a higher level with worse IVs. For example, this is the perfect IV chart for a Galarian Zapdos. So if you find a Galarian Zapdos in the wild and you are like, oh my god, it's a 2027 CP, it's a level 20 hundo, it could be, it could not be, because it could be a higher level one with worse IVs. So when hunting Pokemon in the wild, using this type of chart is usually not that useful. However, when you're catching Pokemon from Team Go Rocket grunts, they're guaranteed to be level 8 or level 13 if they're weather boosted. So a chart like this is actually useful because you can look at the level 8 100% IV Gibble in this instance, which is 250 CP. So if you find a 250 CP Shadow Gibble, non-weather boosted, that's a guaranteed hundo. Do note, however, some Pokemon's 100% IV CP is the same as the 98. For example, Magikarp, 117 CP can be a hundo Magikarp, but it can also be a 98 Magikarp. This is more true, though, for the lower, weaker Pokemon, which have a smaller CP range. Let's move along, though, to the next best method, which is going to be trading and re-rolling IVs when you trade. If you don't every time you trade away Pokemon, the IVs will be completely changed. Yes, they're not going to stay, which means re-rolling IVs can be a great way to try to get some of your worst Pokemon IVs and get them to better IVs by trading them away. However, the IV floor, which is the lowest possible IVs a Pokemon can be from trades, depends on the level of friendship with that person you're trading with. If you have a good friend level, the IV floor will be 111, meaning the 100% IV odds of 1 in 3,375. A great friend you're trading with will have the IV floor of 222, meaning a 1 in 2,744 chance of being a hundo. An ultra friend is going to have the IV floor of 333, meaning a 1 in 2,197 chance of being a hundo. And the best friend level will have the IV floor of 555, meaning a 1 in 1,331 chance of being a hundo. So yeah, overall, some of my most hundos I've ever gone were from trades because those 1 in 1,331 odds are pretty high. This can be also a great method to hunt specific 100% IVs because you can control what Pokemon is being traded to you. So if your friend catches a bunch of a certain Pokemon that you want a hundo of, they can trade them over to you and you can target that hundo. You can perform 100 trades a day, by the way, so I highly recommend you max out on these. Theoretically, you do trades for like 14 days in a row and you should get a hundo, but obviously that's not how RNG works, but that's based on the odds. Also, when you are trading, it will show you actually the CP the Pokemon can be from the IV floor all the way to the hundo. So you can actually see before that trade is what CP you should be looking for if you want that to turn into 100% IV. Now we'll get back to trading in a little bit, but let's move on to the next best method, which is going to be purifying Shadow Pokemon. Now, when you purify a Shadow Pokemon, that Pokemon will gain 2 IVs, meaning that if a Shadow Pokemon has an IV floor of 13, 13, 13 or higher, it's actually guaranteed to be 100% IV when purified. This means that there is a certain amount of IV spreads that are guaranteed 100% IVs in Pokemon Go, and depending on if a Pokemon is weather boosted or not, you can find the odds of what a purified Shadow Pokemon. For a non-weather boosted Shadow Pokemon, the odds of being a purified Hundo are 1 in 151, so pretty high. And in weather boost conditions, it's actually a 1 in 64 chance, meaning every 1 in 64 IV sets can be purified into a Hundo. Although Shadow Pokemon are very useful in their Shadow form, if you are just hunting Hundos, Shadow Pokemon can be a great way to go after it. However, again, I don't recommend really purifying a lot of Shadow Pokemon because you really want that extra damage that they end up providing. Remember, a 0 IV Shadow is better than 100% IV regular Pokemon in raids. However, that's not all for Shadow Pokemon because there's other types of ways we can encounter Shadow Pokemon. This includes Shadow Raids, as well as the encounter with Giovanni's Shadow Legendary. Shadow Raids are going to have an IV floor of 666, and these IV floors will stay as 666 even if they are weather boosted. Now, I do want to note that the IV floor for Shadow Pokemon was just raised to 777 for Tier 5 Shadow Raids during the Fashion Week Taken Over event, so we'll talk about what the IV floor for the 777 is if that ends up staying and becoming permanent. But the odds of getting a Hundo Shadow Pokemon from a raid is 1 in 1,000 with the IV floor of 666. And a purified Hundo is going to be a 1 in 512. If we're looking at the IV floor of 77, you're looking at a 1 in 729 chance of a Hundo and a 1 in 27 chance of a purified Hundo. So the odds are much, much higher. Overall, again, Shadow Raid's a great way to hunt for Hundos, but I usually don't recommend purifying for the Hundos because the Shadow form is what you're really looking for. I'm curious if we're actually going to get to keep the 777 IV floor or if it's going to go away. Anyway, that moves us on to the top 3 methods. Coming in third place is going to be the tried and true level 20 raids, research, max battles, and egg hatched Pokemon. Yes, Pokemon encountered from those methods I just mentioned are all going to have an IV floor of 10, 10, 10, meaning that's the lowest the IVs can be. And this leads a 1 in 216 chance of a Pokemon being 100% IV from those types of encounters. Now, Pokemon caught from raids can be caught at level 20 or level 25 if weather boosted. Pokemon hatched from eggs will always be caught at level 20. Pokemon caught from research will always be caught at level 15. And Pokemon from Dynamax battles will always be caught at level 20. Because all of these IV floors are so fixed, we can actually use charts like these and third-party sources to find out what the 100% IVs are in those scenarios. For example, a Gibble non-weather boosted from a raid is going to be a 635 100% IV CP. If we're looking at a Gibble that's weather boosted in a raid, 794. If we're looking at a Gibble from research, 477. And you can use charts like GoHub to really find out what CPs you should be looking for that are guaranteed hundos from those types of encounters. I know a lot of people will use like non-permanent marker and write them on their arms, the 100% IVs and all that stuff. And that's how people know that things are hundos before they've actually caught them, because they know what the level 20 100% IV of that species of Pokemon is. So again, 1 in 216 chance, not bad, but we can make it better. Come in lucky trades. Remember we were talking about trading and how the IV odds are actually really, really high with a best friend. Well, we can actually make those odds even higher with lucky trades. If you don't know, once you hit best friends, you can interact every single day until you hit something called lucky friends. There's a random odds, I think it's like a 10% chance every time you interact with a friend once a day that you hit lucky. Once you're lucky, their next trade you do is going to be a lucky trade. When a Pokemon is lucky traded, it's going to have a special background, and the IV floor is actually going to be 12, 12, 12, meaning the lowest IVs you can get is 12, 12, 12. This leads us a 1 in 64 chance of getting 100% IV from a lucky trade. Yes, the odds are very high. So again, I always recommend interacting with your friends as much as you can because you do want to be best friends with them and then you want to try to hit that lucky status. We also have an item coming out during the Unova tour called the Lucky Trinket, which you're going to have to pay for. But if you end up getting it, it's actually going to allow you to trigger lucky status automatically once with a friend. It's not completely game breaking, but it is a cool option if there's somebody you really want to be lucky with. You can use your Lucky Trinket. More videos on how to get that item soon. Oh, and by the way, the Lucky Trinket, you can hit lucky friends with anyone of any level. You don't have to be best friends, which is cool. I also do want to mention that Pokemon can sometimes randomly go lucky. As we were talking about earlier, if you're just randomly trading with a friend, sticking to those regular best friend odds, there's like a 5% chance that a random trade just goes lucky. And if a trade does go lucky, it's still going to have those 12, 12, 12 IV floor. So trading is a really, really good way to get hundos because not only can you have really, really good regular odds, but also Pokemon trades can go lucky. Also, if you have Pokemon that are older, the odds of going lucky increases as well. Pokemon caught before 2018 have guaranteed odds of going lucky for the first 25 you trade. And then any Pokemon that's older, like 2020 or younger, or even like 2021, the older the better, the odds of a trade randomly going lucky increase. So hold on to any of those old Pokemon you might have and trade them. But that moves us into our best way to get 100% IVs, the best odds to get hundos, and it's actually a 1 in 27 chance. But unfortunately, it's not available right now. That's because Mighty Pokemon, which were released during the Go Wild area, was the best possible odds to get a hundo because they had an IV floor of 13, 13, 13. Now, these Pokemon were very difficult to catch. You need Safari Balls to really catch them effectively. But 13, 13, 13 IV floors leads to a 1 in 27 odds of a hundo and crazy odds on the Shundos as well. I know a lot of people were getting Shundos during the Wild area event. Will Mighty Pokemon ever return? Maybe. My guess is yes. But honestly, this feature is amazing and the best way to get hundos. So if you ever hear Mighty Pokemon have returned and you want hundos, go after them. This feature was so sick, man. I hope they bring it back. Watch the other videos on screen. If you learned something from this one, you'll learn something from those as well. And follow for more tips. Peace.